At the very beginning of the story, we are introduced to a formidable sniper. This man is so skilled that he can take out a target kilometers away in the blink of an eye, even while blindfolded. But would you believe that this deadly sniper used to live the life of a simple, ordinary math teacher? He actually despised war and guns with a passion. However, one day something happened in his life that transformed him from a gentle educator into a ruthless sniper. So, as the story properly begins, we see a small village in Ukraine. There, in a modest little house, lived a couple who were spending their days in pure happiness. The man of the house was named Mykola, and his wife was Nastya. Nastya was an artist. She would carve wood to create various kinds of sculptures. Mykola was a teacher in this very village. He taught mathematics to children at a nearby school. He was an excellent educator and was the favorite teacher of all the kids. However, there was one student, a boy named Ivan, who didn't like him at all. Ivan was an incredibly rude boy. Every single day in class, he would find ways to annoy Mykola. Ivan actually came from a wealthy family, which was why he couldn't stand Mykola, who was a poor man. Ivan would constantly make fun of Mykola's appearance and his clothes. He wanted Mykola to get fed up with his disrespect and hit him, so that he could file a complaint and get Mykola fired from the school. But Mykola was a very calm-natured man. Ivan's words didn't bother him in the slightest. He was completely content and absorbed in his own life. Now, Mykola was so poor that he didn't even have a TV or any electronics in his home, so he never received news from the outside world on time. One day, while Mykola was at school, he saw a news report on TV stating that Russia had attacked Ukraine. Many soldiers had been killed, and Russia had already seized control of several Ukrainian territories. Later that evening, when Mykola returned home, he found out that his wife was pregnant. Hearing this, he was overjoyed because he was finally going to be a father. The couple celebrated this beautiful moment together. The very next day, Mykola said goodbye to his wife and set off on his bicycle, heading to school to teach the children. However, on his way, he spotted two soldiers standing there, lighting cigarettes and wearing a strange type of uniform. These uniforms looked nothing like those of the Ukrainian soldiers, which Mykola found very odd. But Mykola assumed that perhaps the government had changed the soldiers' uniforms due to the war, so he didn't give it much thought and quickly arrived at the school. When he entered the building, however, he found the entire school completely empty. Not a single child had shown up. Seeing this, he realized something was definitely wrong. Just then, he saw a news report on the TV stating that Russian troops had pushed deep into the country to occupy Ukraine. That was when Mykola realized that the men he had seen on the road were actually Russian soldiers. Realizing this, Mykola became terrified for his wife, as Nastya was home all alone. He immediately jumped on his bike and raced back toward his house, but by then, it was already too late. When Mykola arrived, he saw those two soldiers brutally beating his wife. He tried desperately to save her, but the soldiers beat him until he was half dead. Mykola begged them with folded hands, saying, "Please, don't hurt my wife. She is pregnant." But the soldiers didn't listen to a word he said and continued to beat them ruthlessly. After a while, one of the Russian soldiers searched Mykola's house, but finding nothing of value, he angrily set the house on fire. As they started to leave the scene, Nastya, seeing her home burning, became red with rage. She picked up a stone and threw it at the Russian soldiers. In response, one of the soldiers opened fire, and poor Nastya was killed right there. Watching his wife die right before his eyes, Mykola's world completely collapsed. He rushed over to her, held her in his arms, and wept uncontrollably. After a few hours had passed, two Ukrainian soldiers approached Mykola. Seeing his dead wife, the soldiers felt terrible. They placed their hands on Mykola's shoulders and tried to comfort him. The soldiers then began to dig a grave for Mykola's wife. Once it was ready, they told Mykola to lay his wife to rest there. Following his wife's death, Mykola was completely broken. He was now utterly alone because those Russian soldiers hadn't just killed his wife. They had destroyed his unborn child and his home as well. Now, he was consumed by the fire of revenge. He was determined to kill those Russian soldiers who had shot his wife, no matter the cost. The only way to take revenge on those soldiers was for him to join the Ukrainian army. So he pleaded with the two soldiers, saying, "Please, take me with you. I want to join the Ukrainian army too." The soldiers agreed to Mykola's request, put him in their vehicle, and drove him to the army base. Before leaving, Mykola took a small statue made by his wife and kept it with him. His wife had made it for his protection. When they arrived at the military base, the senior officer saw Mykola and became furious with the two soldiers. He refused to enlist Mykola in the army because he suspected that Mykola might be a spy. However, after the senior officer learned more about Mykola from the two soldiers, and Mykola himself explained everything, how the Russian soldiers had brutally murdered his wife and burned down his home, the officer's attitude changed. Mykola convinced the senior officer that he wanted to kill those Russian soldiers to liberate his country. After hearing all this, the senior officer agreed to let Mykola join the Ukrainian army. His training began the very next day. Since Mykola was just an ordinary civilian, he faced a lot of difficulties during training. At one point, all the soldiers were given the task of assembling guns, but Mykola was much slower than the others. He finished assembling his gun last. Seeing this, the officer thought Mykola would never make a good soldier, but Mykola didn't give up. He remained extremely focused on his training. One night during training, Mykola told his senior, "Sir, don't call me by my name. My code name is Raven." Hearing this, everyone started laughing at him. His senior told him, "Code names aren't given so easily. A soldier has to do something significant for the country to earn one." Mykola didn't take these words negatively. Instead, he started working even harder. Even when all the other soldiers were asleep at night, Mykola continued to practice. One day, the senior officer informed all the soldiers that they had a shortage of snipers and needed to increase their numbers to counter the Russians. The senior then asked everyone, "How many of you want to become snipers?" Hearing this, a few soldiers stood up, and Mykola was among them because he too wanted to become a sniper. Seeing Mykola stand up, the other soldiers started laughing. The seniors told him, "You're not ready to be a sniper yet. You can't even assemble and disassemble a gun properly. So being a sniper is out of the question for you." That's when Mykola said, "Sir, I can be a good sniper. Just give me one chance to prove myself." Hearing this, the senior told Mykola, "All right, here. You have to assemble this gun in just 20 seconds. To prove himself, Mykola blindfolded himself and quickly took the gun apart and put it back together again. It took him only 18 seconds to complete the task. Everyone was amazed by Mykola's speed. Those who had been laughing at him started clapping for him. The senior officer was also impressed by Mykola, and seeing his potential, he was allowed to join the sniper training. Now, during the sniper training, Mykola was handed an old model weapon, while the others were given new, modern weapons. Seeing this, Mykola also demanded a modern gun. The senior officer there told him, "If you want that modern gun, you have to prove yourself." Mykola had no other option, so he took the gun he was given and left. During training, the senior officer told everyone that no matter what the situation is, a sniper must not move even an inch from their position and must always keep their aim on the target. To practice this, the senior officer fired shots next to each sniper. Any sniper who moved from their position was removed from the training. But when it was Mykola's turn, he didn't flinch even a bit and kept his aim perfectly steady. In this way, Mykola passed this part of the training. In the next training exercise, the snipers were shown their target only once. Then, a blackboard was placed in front of their eyes to block the view. They had to shoot the target by estimating its position. Several of the other soldiers passed this test, but when it was Mykola's turn, his aim was slightly off, and Mykola failed the test. Because the gun he had was extremely old, getting a perfect aim with it was incredibly difficult. However, everyone knew that if Mykola had been given a new modern rifle, he would have been able to hit the target perfectly. Anyway, the next phase of training was even harder for the snipers because they had to shoot their targets illuminated only by the light of a flare gun. And to make matters worse, it was in the dead of night. The senior officer fired the flare gun, and everyone took their aim. But not a single one of them could hit their target. Everyone else fired their shots, but Mykola was the only one who didn't pull the trigger. He realized that aiming directly under the flickering light of a flare was practically impossible. So, when the senior officer launched the flare, instead of shooting blindly, Mykola used the brief light to estimate the distance of his target. Using his knowledge of mathematics, he calculated the shot and fired perfectly. Seeing this, his senior and the other soldiers were absolutely stunned. No one had ever been able to complete this task before, yet Mykola had done it. The senior officer was so impressed with Mykola that he granted him his preferred codename, Raven. Days went by like this, and Mykola continued to train with all his heart and soul. Finally, the day arrived when the results of their training were to be announced. The colonel saluted Mykola and informed him that he had passed the test. A few days later, the colonel came to Mykola and told him, "Pack your things. We have a mission. We've received intel that some Russian soldiers have taken over a checkpoint." And this is where the real story begins. Mykola's team quickly arrived at the location and set up their positions, ready to take aim. Just as they were about to open fire on the Russian soldiers, they spotted a car approaching the checkpoint from a distance. Because of this, the colonel ordered everyone to hold their fire. Meanwhile, the Russian soldiers stopped the car and ordered the people inside to get out. They checked their passports and searched the entire vehicle. When everything seemed to be in order, the soldiers gave them permission to leave. However, they kept the passports for themselves. When the civilians asked for their passports back, the soldiers started beating them severely. Seeing all of this unfold, the colonel gave the order to fire. In an instant, all the snipers took out their targets, and just like that, their first mission was completed. After the mission, when everyone returned to the base, Mykola noticed that many of his comrades were missing from the army base. He became worried and wondered where everyone had gone. When he asked, "Where are the rest of my comrades?" he was informed that they had been sent on another mission. The next day, Mykola received the devastating news that many of his comrades who had gone on that mission had been killed. They had all been taken out by a single Russian sniper. That sniper's name was Sergei, and he was known as Russia's most fearsome sniper. Some time passed after that incident, and Mykola set out on his next mission with his team. Upon reaching the location, they planted mines all around the area and took their positions. A short while later, Russian soldiers arrived at the scene. Among those soldiers was Ivan. Ivan was the same boy who used to harass Mykola at school. He had now joined the Russian army for money. But when the colonel gave the order to shoot, Mykola hesitated for a moment. He really didn't want to kill his own student. However, Mykola pushed his emotions aside and shot at a landmine located on the other side. A massive explosion erupted, killing all the Russian soldiers, including Ivan, instantly. Once everything was under control, the colonel, furious, asked Mykola, "What were you thinking when I gave the order to shoot?" Mykola replied, "One of those Russian soldiers was my student. I didn't want to kill him." But the colonel explained to Mykola that he shouldn't feel any guilt over Ivan's death. He said, "Out there, he wasn't your student. He was your enemy. Joining the Russian army was Ivan's own decision. He committed treason, so there is no need for you to feel bad for him." Anyway, after finishing the mission, they all returned to the base camp. The colonel trusted Mykola completely, so he spent most of his time with him. There, the colonel showed Mykola a photo of his family and told him that there were 3 members in his family. His 2 daughters didn't even know their father was a soldier. The colonel said, "I told them I'm a businessman, and my wife has never told the kids that I'm a soldier." In return, Mykola shared his own tragic story with the colonel, explaining how ruthlessly the Russian soldiers had murdered his wife. At this moment, Mykola became quite emotional, but the colonel managed to calm him down. The next morning, they all set out on their next mission. This mission was critical because they had received intel that a group of Russian soldiers would be passing along that road. The colonel and Mykola quickly arrived at the location and took up their positions. A short while later, they spotted 2 Russian soldiers who were waiting for the rest of their team. Mykola noticed that one of these 2 soldiers was the very man who had shot his wife, and he was now right in Mykola's crosshairs. Mykola asked for permission to fire, but the colonel denied it. Mykola started turning red with rage because the soldier standing in front of him was the one who had killed his wife, and he had joined the army specifically to avenge her death. So, he asked for permission to fire again. But once again, the colonel forbade him. This time, however, Mykola couldn't control his emotions any longer. Disobeying the colonel's direct order, he pulled the trigger. The soldier was hit and died instantly. But the worst part was that the Russian soldiers now knew their location. The colonel asked Mykola, "What have you done?" But things were about to get much worse because Russia's most fearsome sniper, Sergei, was also positioned nearby, and he too had figured out their location. The colonel knew that Sergei was somewhere close, so he started scanning for him. But before he could pinpoint Sergei's location, Sergei landed a headshot on the colonel, killing him right there. Mykola now realized what a massive mistake he had made. Because of his error, the colonel had lost his life today. Mykola understood that the Russians had compromised their position. Meanwhile, the Russian soldiers began firing wildly and bombing Mykola's location. Seeing the situation deteriorating rapidly, Mykola decided to retreat immediately. He picked up the colonel's body and began moving back from his position. He managed to escape the enemy territory quickly and went straight back to his army camp. There, Mykola felt immense regret over the colonel's death. He blamed himself for it and swore an oath that he would kill Serhiy by any means necessary to avenge the colonel. Soon after, Mykola received intel about 2 Russian snipers and immediately set out for his next mission. He arrived at the location and set up his aim. He quickly took out one of the snipers, but while doing so, the other sniper shot Mykola in the hand. However, he didn't give up and somehow managed to kill the second sniper as well. Since he was badly injured, he went to a secret base to rest and let his body recover. During this time, he received a call from an army major who informed Mykola, "We've found the sniper who killed the colonel." Mykola then arrived at the base, where the major briefed everyone about the enemy sniper. The major informed them that the sniper's name was Serhiy, and he was Russia's best and most dangerous sniper. He had never missed a shot. Serhiy had already killed 6 of Ukraine's most capable snipers. Therefore, they shouldn't take Serhiy lightly at all. The major also mentioned that Serhiy would first kill Ukrainian soldiers, then make videos of the kills and upload them to social media to demoralize the Ukrainian army. He explained that Serhiy was the kind of sniper who usually never changed his position and preferred to hunt his enemies from a single fixed spot. So, they all came up with a plan to approach Serhiy's location in 2 teams. According to the plan, the first team would attack the Russian soldiers from the front. While the Russians were busy dealing with that attack, the second team would ambush them from behind. Taking advantage of this chaos, Mykola would enter the building and take out Serhiy. Once the entire plan was finalized, they all set out for the location. Upon arrival, all the snipers took their positions and readied their aim. Meanwhile, Mykola quietly entered the building, where he saw 2 Russian soldiers talking to each other. Without wasting a second, Mykola killed both of them and advanced toward the front of the building. Then, as per the plan, he signaled his team. Upon receiving the signal, the waiting snipers took out all the soldiers. Meanwhile, Serhiy noticed that none of his comrades were reporting back to him. Sensing something was wrong, he moved up to the roof of the building. There was already another Russian sniper stationed on the roof, but when Serhiy got up there, he found that the sniper was already dead. Seeing this, his heart began to pound even faster. Now Serhiy realized that the Ukrainian soldiers had surrounded him from all sides. He quickly contacted his base camp for backup, but he was told that the backup team would take another 10 minutes to reach him. Hearing this, he quickly rushed to his position and started scanning for the Ukrainian soldiers. But just then, he noticed a small statue placed on the table right in front of him. It was actually placed there by Mykola, the very statue his wife had given him. Before Serhiy could even process what was happening, Mykola attacked him. He stabbed him with a knife and brutally killed him. However, the struggle alerted a second sniper inside the building. But before he could make a move, Mykola threw a grenade at him. The blast killed that final sniper instantly. A short while later, the backup team Serhiy had summoned arrived near the building, but they had no idea that Serhiy was already dead. So, when they tried calling Serhiy, Mykola answered the phone and told them, "You are all about to die." With those words, he shot the truck driver. As soon as the shot was fired, panic erupted among the Russian soldiers. They all scrambled to jump out of the truck, but they didn't realize that the Ukrainian snipers already had their sights locked on them. The Ukrainian soldiers opened heavy fire, picking off every single Russian soldier one by one. A few days after the mission, Mykola visited his wife's grave. He had made a promise to his wife that he would take revenge on her killers. Now, that vengeance was complete. He had eliminated everyone responsible for the deaths of his wife and the colonel. Standing there, Mykola vowed that he would continue to serve his country until his very last breath. Saying this, he walked away. And with this scene, the movie comes to an end. So let me know in the comments how you liked the story. And just a heads up, this story has no relation to reality. It is a completely fictional movie. Anyway, do share your thoughts on the story in the comments. I'm signing off for today.